Well, welcome to another edition of Intentional Conversations with Mike Sandlin. On Intentional Conversations, we seek to interview men's leaders in men's ministry to help men grow spiritually and help leaders and pastors to reach men in today's culture, discussing issues men face every day. This is a program where a men's marriage leader interviews leaders in men's marriage, and I'm your host, Mike Sandlin. Thank you for joining us today. Remember when you were growing up and someone was teaching you how to do something, or maybe you were trained to do a particular task at work and you were having a difficult time? The person who was teaching you may have been a little frustrated with you, and it would say in an annoying voice, they say, "This is not rocket science." Well, the authors of the book, No Man Left Behind, confirmed that ministering to men is rocket science. And today, my guest is the National Field Staff Chaplain of Man in the Mirror, Ronn Read. And we will be discussing how or is men's ministry rocket science, and how do we work through that concept of reaching men and ministering to men. Ron has been with Man in the Mirror for nearly 8 years, serving as a Chicagoland Area Director, then a Central States Regional Director, and now he has that position of the National Field Staff Chaplain. His goal is to challenge every believer in developing a biblical worldview and to bring out the best in every Christian, that we might reveal the reality of Christ in all we do. And Ron is the author of 2 books, The Church, the Only Army That Shoots Its Wounded, and a novel called Blood Reflections. Ron and his wife Janie have 5 children and 17 grandchildren. Wow, man. Yeah. You've been busy. Yeah. And Ron's passion is, of course, in church health, and his best place to discuss it is on the golf course. And you must be a scratch golfer, Ron. Good.
Oh, I wish. I would help a lot, but that's scratch out numbers.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you. Glad to have you on the program, man. It's great that you took some time to your busy schedule to join me today.
I greatly appreciate the opportunity, Mike.
Yeah. Let me ask you. I always ask my guests a couple of questions, especially anybody that's in men's ministry. But one of the things I'd like to ask you is, what is that one verse that may be speaking into your life right now, or maybe a verse that you claim as a life verse or a favorite verse, and that you just like to hold on to as you look at in ministry, and why is that verse so special to you?
Yeah, well, obviously there's a lot. I just heard the very first verse I ever memorized along with my wife was Ecclesiastes 4, that says 2 are better than 1. They have a good return for the labor. And then we also memorized Lamentations 3, that it is because of the Lord's mercies that we're not consumed. His compassions fail not. They're new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness. But I think my life's verse is one that I've got taped on my wall right here in front of me. Colossians 1, 28 and 29. We proclaim him. That's something I've been doing for the last 43 years as a pastor, admonishing and teaching everyone with all wisdom. And then the key phrase in there, so that we may present everyone perfect in Christ. To this end I labor, struggling with all his energy, which so powerfully works in me. And the thing that I focus on, and I've really been focusing on a lot lately, is that so that, Paul said it earlier in Colossians chapter 1, so that we would have the strength and the patience. And Jesus himself in John 14, 15, and 16, his upper room discourse, probably used the phrase so that 7 or 8 times. And it shows, and this verse that I've claimed shows, there better be a purpose in what we're doing. If we're just preaching, it's probably for our own glory. But if we're doing it so that we may present every man perfect in Christ, and that key phrase, that Greek word hina, that in order that, or that so that, is what drives us to do what we do, or it better.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. That is something that we need to be all about in ministering to the people that we correct. And the interesting thing is that we continue on with that, is that what Paul told Timothy, in 2 Timothy 2:2 about that you have heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, trusted to faithful men who will be able to teach others also. And that's one of the things that we need to be able to do is to do that, to be able to grow in our own walk with Christ so we can entrust it to other men that we come across. Well, let me ask you this, Ron. Appreciate you sharing that scripture. What got you into ministry? I know you have a pastoral background, strong theological background, obviously, but what possessed you to get into focusing on ministering to men?
Well, you asked that question. I've asked that several times. What possessed me? Because men are a unique breed, as we know, to minister to. Mm-hmm. I've often joked as I've done training with men's leadership teams. If you want a women's ministry, buy a doily, a candle, some potpourri, and a Bible study, and you've got a women's ministry.
Absolutely, but, that's right.
Men's ministry is entirely different. Our No Man Left Behind mantra is the create value, capture momentum, sustain change.
Right.
Creating that value, helping men to see what they, giving them what they want because we know what they need, and finding that niche, finding that value, finding that time in their lives to where we were able to reach them. But you asked the question, how did I get into it? Yeah, exactly. 43 years ago, 2 weeks. On Father's Day was my first Sunday in the pulpit as a full-time pastor. I was the youngest dad. At that point they gave out the oldest dad, youngest dad, all those awards. We've gotten politically correct since then. We can't really do all that stuff. But I was the youngest dad. I had a 2-year-old daughter, and I had another baby that would end up being a son on the way within about 3 weeks after that. But I'm standing there as a pastor, having spent 1 year in Bible college. My first 3 years, I was not a Christian. I accepted Christ my junior year of college. And so I went to Liberty University at that point, Lynchburg Baptist College, and, went to that 1 year of Bible college. Then they hired me as the assistant baseball coach on the condition that I go to seminary. So I went through my first 2 years of seminary just because I got to coach baseball. So I finally took my last year of seminary with some seriousness because I had pastored a church that summer and realized this was my calling. So I got into church work 43 years ago, Father's Day, but I knew nothing. I literally knew nothing. But the one thing I did know was, as I walked into that church, was that as goes the man, so goes the church. And that particular church was about 20% men, 80% women, and a lot of much older women. Well, they loved having this 24-year-old pastor until I started preaching some of what I was preaching. But it started winning some men. And I started purposely focused on winning men to come to church. And so we started doing different things. My second church, I was at that church for 10 years. My second, by the way, when I left, we were running about 50% men.
Wow.
So, we did see a lot of men. I baptized an awful lot of men during that 10 years, and we had a lot of young dads, because I was a young dad. We had a lot of young dads that started attending, and we purposely reached out to them. Your program title of intentionality, we had that intentionality. We were going to reach young dads. So we did a lot of marriage classes, a lot of parenting classes, and a lot of just how to be a man. I didn't know how to be a man at that point. I didn't know, at that point, if you could find a Christian bookstore and you went to the shelves looking for men's ministry, you saw 2 books. You saw A Measure of a Man by Gene Getz, and you saw Man in the Mirror by Pat Morley. We went through both of them in that men's ministry, but it really was more of a typical men's ministry with the pancake breakfast, the speaker, and we didn't really have small groups. We just got together and did stuff, played softball and did stuff. But we did reach a lot of men, and I'm still close to a lot of those men because I led them to Christ and did the best job I could of discipling them. Then I went to my next church. We were there for 7 years, about 30% men. When we left, again, about 50% men because of that focus. And I guess the challenge that I've had is, as goes the man, so goes the church. My last pastor out in Tacoma, Washington, when I arrived, 7 men had just gotten back. That Sunday that I was there was their Sunday back from one of the very first Promise Keepers events. They were turned on. They were just passionate. So but they didn't have any next steps. So we purposely focused on what do we do next? And that intentionality again of how do we grow those men led to what was my first real understanding of men's ministry. And actually, I'm going to back that up. First understanding of ministry to men. That it wasn't just the men's ministry that was the program.
Well, that's actually a difference, if you don't mind being interrupted. That is a difference there between men's ministry and ministering to men. There's a huge difference there.
Yeah, and we began to see that the ministry to all men, every man in our church. And so that involved our second key component. We needed to know our players. First one being intentionality. Second one, we needed to know who were our men. And I'm very thankful for the No Man Left Behind, the 5 types of men. Yep. Coach K used to put them in the 5 chairs. And,
yeah, you did.
So we had the 5 types of men. I didn't even know about them, but I understood we needed to identify our men who didn't know Christ. We needed to identify our men who were just wearing the uniform, but not necessarily wanting to play the game. So that shaped into my 4th church, my last church in Chicagoland. We went with men's fraternity, and we had 211 men go through that first year of men's fraternity. And it was radical transformation of a ministry to men. Those men understood their role. They understood stop playing the part of the little boy and be the man. And they began to understand what steps do we take to do that. Mm-hmm. So that's how I got into ministry to men, or men's ministry, was somewhat by accident of realizing I'm the only guy here and we need to have more men. And then the understanding that this is what's going to happen to truly change the church and change the family and change the community was to reach men.
Well, that's interesting, and that's good. It's, God just kind of gradually moved you into that position as you processed through your churches and your ministry, and you saw what it was, what kind of an effect it was having on your churches as you got these men more involved. And one of the things that I've kind of questioned, and I'm actually pondering it as a possible book, so to speak. If you remember, I know you were well aware of David Morrow's book that he wrote about 14 years ago about why do men hate going to church. Yeah. And I was thinking about that the other day, and I had to ask this question of myself as I was kind of reminiscing about that book and thinking about some of the stuff he said in there, is why do our churches ignore our men? Mm. So, and I'm not saying that they deliberately do, but I think a lot of times is they just don't know how to reach out and connect with their men. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that you said it there, that they just don't know how.
Yeah.
Well, again, it's very easy. Well, as easy as church work gets, to have youth ministry, children's ministry, worship ministry, women's ministry. All of those things they're just natural because there's a hunger, a desire, a crying need that is very visible and very just much in the face of the pastor. He knows all these have to happen, but men's ministry, even if he knows it has to happen, it's very difficult to get it to happen.
Yeah,
I'm going to point out one of the other things that pastors face constantly, and that is what we call the discombobulated blob, it's the all the different ministries. It's on one sheet of paper that we give out at the No Man Left Behind. It's all the different ministries that take place in a church.
Yep.
And I can remember numerous elders meetings, deacons meetings, where we'd talk about all the things we were doing as a church. We have all these ministries, all these programs, all these events. And inevitably somebody would say, we need to drop some of these. And I would always, tongue in cheek, say, okay, let's drop women's ministries. Who's going to tell them? I get that reaction. We all knew we're not going to do that.
That ain't going to happen.
No, it ain't going to happen. What I didn't have was that there are methods And then there are outcomes, and the ultimate outcome is, are we making disciples?
Right.
So this discombobulated blob, we now look at that with a team and we say, what are the methods? What are your outcomes? And if you're not getting the outcome, then why do you keep doing that? Or how can you change that method, that ministry, to get the desired outcome of making disciples?
Interesting.
And that's again, that's something that without just doing the day-to-day work, Sundays come with an amazing regularity for a pastor. And doing that daily work, and even having staff do that daily work, sometimes we forget where are we focused on our outcomes, and what are the real outcomes that we're getting, and are we changing men? Are we seeing men become that man of God? So because all these other things kind of go, they just kind of go without us having to really push them. It's easy to forget this is one we have to push. We have to work at. We have to have a process, a system, a plan. And I think that's one of the main lacks in most ministry to men or men's ministries, is there's really not a process. There's just, this is how we've always done it.
Right.
Or even worse, this works in the sense that it's going and going and going, but we don't look at it, what is it producing? I hadn't planned on this, but I'll share this, that back when I was pastoring in Washington State, my wife called me up one day. She was at a garage sale. She goes, you got to get down here and see this thing. You're going to want it. Well, there's very little at a garage sale that I want, but I got in the car, drove down to where she was at. And that was back when Boeing was in Seattle. And there was a Boeing engineer that had built in his spare time a perpetual motion machine. It was made out of wire coat hangers. It stood about 5 feet tall, about 5 feet long, and about 2.5 feet wide. And it had this arm that constantly went, and it would grab a ball and drop it down onto a channel. Each size ball, there were about 6 or 7 different size balls, had a different channel. And each channel had different things in it. One had a bird cage that the feathers blew out and came back in as soon as the ball went through it. Another one had a xylophone and had all these things on it. And it was just constantly, ringing, whistling, doing all this stuff. So I bought it. He wanted his wife wanted $10 for it, and I got her down to $7. I bought this thing, and I started taking it to churches when I would talk. I was the president of our ministerial, or of our Baptist association there. Right. And so when we'd go into churches, I'd bring this thing and I'd set it up and get it going, and kids loved it, but men would come up and they would look at this thing like, wow, look at this. Mm-hmm. And I'd let it run for about 3 or 4 minutes. And then I'd say, okay, this is fascinating. What does it do? What is it actually doing? Nothing. It's fascinating to look at, but it's not really accomplishing anything. And I would say, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the church of today. We're fascinating to look at, but are we really doing anything? And sadly, most churches don't have that intentionality, that system, that plan, that process, and they don't know their players. So as a result, we just keep doing what we've always done.
Oh yeah. And what's the definition of insanity? but not to say our churches are insane. But
no, who would ever say that?
But you mentioned something earlier. I think we probably need to touch on a little bit for our listening and viewing audiences that that's never read the No Man Left Behind book, or never heard anything from Man in the Mirror as far as ministry. But you made the comment about the 5 types of men.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't realize there are 5 types of men in every church.
Yes.
Share that a little bit.
Okay. All right. Yeah. It's really kind of the bread and butter of a first step for a men's leadership team. Mm-hmm. Know your players. Yep. So the first guy is the natural man, or he could be identified as the man who needs Christ. Mm-hmm. He wakes up in the morning and it's all about him. What am I going to do today? And the Bible says of him that the natural man cannot comprehend the things of the Spirit. Literally, it says they are moronic to him. He cannot get, why do you want to pray? Why do you want to go to church? And what's this singing all about? I was actually playing golf with a guy one time, and he leaned on his driver and he goes, "I'm not taking a shower. Why would I want to sing?" So I actually preached a message titled that, "I'm not taking a shower. Why do I sing?" What's worship all about? If you don't know the one you're singing about, why sing? And so the natural man, again, it's all about him. If we were to picture the old Cru or Campus Crusade spiritual life, this is the circle and the cross is outside of the circle, and myself, is on the throne. That's the natural man.
Right.
Sadly, most churches say we want to reach that guy, and especially as a ministry to men, we want to get that guy, but we don't plan or have a process for reaching that guy. We don't create value in his life. We don't identify that what are his felt needs of buddies, of making more money. That we're looking down the road at a Dave Ramsey, and he's going, "Hey, I just want to make money." So it's a learning what is his mindset, how does he think, and sometimes one of the best things a men's leadership team can do, surprisingly, is put one of those guys on your leadership team, so that you get how does he feel about our pancake breakfast? How does he feel about our retreat? You're not going to get that guy to come to a retreat. He doesn't know these guys. He likes his own bed. He likes his comfort. And so now to say, we're going to have this retreat with this great speaker, you're not going to say, first of all, he never heard the announcement about the retreat because he's not in church. And secondly, if he did hear about it, I'm not going to that thing. So that's the first man. And again, he is probably, the pastor would say, "Well, he's not in my church anyway." Yeah, he is, because his wife comes, his kids come, his dad got buried at your church 7 years ago. That's his church. If anybody ever asks him to go to church, he's going to give the answer that everybody wants to hear.
A lot of those guys are there just to keep peace in the family, so to speak.
Exactly. Well, that's kind of our second guy. This first guy, you probably only see him Christmas, Easter, maybe on Mother's Day, because his wife drug him to church.
Yeah.
The second guy is the cultural Christian, and that's the guy that comes to keep the peace. He knows about God. Maybe he's even invited Christ into his life, but he's just there. He is, again, back to that circle. He's still on the throne, but Christ is introduced inside of that circle. He knows enough about Christ to know, I need to get saved. My fire insurance from hell. But this is the kind of guy you can easily identify during worship service. He's this guy.
Yep.
He's just, he's looking around. He's not singing the songs because he doesn't really know the Savior. He doesn't really know that change in his life. So again, this is the cultural Christian. He identifies as a Christian, but it's only because it's the culturally acceptable thing to do. So he wakes up in the morning saying, "Okay, God, what are you going to do for me today?" And that's his driving force. Is God is his vending machine or his spare tire that helps him out of critical situations. The third kind of guy is the biblical Christian. And this is the guy who not only has invited Christ into his life, he wants to grow. He's the man who does attend the Bible studies, who does come to Sunday school, who comes to church and is wanting to learn and to grow. Here's the one thing about him. He doesn't look down the row at those other two guys. He's just looking at, God, what can I do for you today? And he has a hunger, he has a growth, and he's probably the majority of men in our men's ministry. Not in our ministry to men, that's much broader, but in our men's ministry, this is the guy who shows up. Right. He's going to be at your retreat. He's going to be at your pancake breakfast. He's going to be there. And sadly, we design most of our stuff for that guy, with these other two guys kind of in our thoughts and prayers, but not in our plans and our actions. The fourth guy is the leadership Christian, the servant leadership. And he's the man who does look down that row, and he says, God, what can I do for you and for others? So that's his thought when he wakes up in the morning, and he is constantly looking at, what can we be doing to reach men? What can we be doing to change that guy? He could probably tell you the 4 or 5 guys in his immediate circle where they stand on that 5 types of men, and how can we reach them? He's there. he's thinking about it. That's probably only about 5% of the men in your church, but most church leadership teams are made up of those 5, and they need to be driven and helped. How can we be more effective? Now, the 5th guy overarches all of those previous 4. He is the hurting man.
Yep.
And that's a lot of men in our church.
Oh,
They're hurting because of financial situations, health situations, marital or other relationship situations, children, family. They're hurting. And so as a result, again, it could be that first guy, as a result of his hurt. Let's say he got served divorce papers on Thursday afternoon. Where's he going to be Sunday morning? And when as Pat always says, when he reaches for that door on Sunday morning, he's scared to death. He has no idea what to face in there. And when he opens it, we as a church and as men's ministry to men need to make sure we've got some man there that can identify that guy, reach out to him, encourage him, be there for him. Or it could be the leadership guy that just got diagnosed with cancer. His need is entirely different than it was last week when he thought everything was good. How do we minister to him? So the hurting man is, broad ranged, but he's that guy that we've got to make sure that we are prepared to reach out to and minister to in their hurt.
Yeah, great. That's a good explanation of all of those, and I appreciate you sharing that. One of the things that really got me when I began in men's ministry many moons ago was the fact I was sitting in church one time, and as I was recovering from some medical procedures and some health issues that was going on in my life, and I began to understand that many of our men in our churches are there, what I call just because. They're there just because, whatever reason you want to put in there, they're there because it's what I'm supposed to do on Sunday mornings. Yeah. This is the way I was raised. It's to keep peace in the family. It looks good from a business standpoint, from a community standpoint. And it's not because of their deep inner intentional love that they may have for the Father and Jesus Christ, but it's because they're looking for something for themselves to make sure everything's okay. And that's what God really pressed upon me, the need of getting into. But there's just as much work to do in the church for men as there is outside the church for men. And we need to do that. One of the things I have shared when I talk to leadership teams or leaders or men is when they do events, is to understand whatever event they may be doing, is to understand they will have men, even if they've been in their church for 10 years, who may not have that personal relationship with Jesus Christ, and that they need to develop in that event, whatever it may be, whether it's a Saturday morning breakfast, a golf outing, a tailgate party, whatever it may be, is to present the gospel. It don't have to be a long, drawn-out sermon, and it could be a tract that they make sure they hand out to everybody, but present the gospel, because there's always, when you have a large group of guys, that you're going to have that one guy that doesn't know Christ, and no matter how it is, because and I was impressed upon that when I was actually at a No Man Left Behind training event in Spartanburg, South Carolina, with Coach K. I don't know, some 6-7 years ago. And he asked me if I'd come up there and kind of be one of the table leaders. And I met a man that he wanted me to meet coming into town to show him where to go. And I had lunch with him, and he told me about his wife. And he was talking about his wife, but it could transfer over to a man. But the fact that he married this woman, he said, if anybody's going to heaven, it's this woman right here, because of the fact that she knows her scripture. She can play any instrument up there on that stage, and on and on and on. And then, just to make a long story short, he said after 10 years in their marriage, she woke him up one night in tears saying, I know I need Christ. I've never truly accepted Christ in my life. And that even when they went through that process, he could even see a change in her life because of that. So that just kind of reiterated the fact there's many men in our churches who we think know Christ, but they don't. And we need to be able to touch those guys too.
Right. Yeah, that's something that I've, as a pastor, I love to do weddings and funerals, because in both of them, you've got people who never darken the door of a church except for this event. And they're both of them, and especially a funeral, ready-made to give the gospel and to share that this grave is not the end. And how can we make sure that we are prepared for what is the end, or what is the next step of knowing Christ? By the way, as you're talking about events, that's one of the things that, and maybe I'm jumping ahead with your question, that's one of the things that I so appreciate about Man in the Mirror is our create value, capture momentum right at the event, and then sustain change. Because that's something that I've seen in so many tremendous events over the years, tremendous things. We didn't have a purposeful plan for capturing the momentum and getting that guy in that relationship with other men in that small group. And so, to see that happening, with every one of our events that we do, that ready-made, built-in 6-week life plan is just so vital to get men, maybe even that they were sparked to think about their relationship with Christ. Now for the next 6 weeks, it becomes a real challenge and invitation. And we see so many men who make that step of faith because of that capturing momentum step.
Oh, yeah. That's one of the things I encourage too, is anytime you have an event, be sure you plan the next right step for your men. Yeah. Make sure that there's something, even if it's only one man takes that step, you've been successful when you've done that. Never have an event without something for them to step into coming out of that event. And that's good stuff. Well, Ron, we got about 15 minutes left in our broadcast. We talked about a lot of stuff, and and I know we could continue talking for a long time, but I want you to share a little bit about what church, how they can come in as a consultant, materials they may be able to provide. What can Man in the Mirror do for my local church if I invite you to come in, an area director to come in?
Well, one of the very first things that we can do is that we, our mission statement says it's threefold: that we serve pastors, train leaders, transform men. And that serving pastors is that a lot of men's ministries become almost a burden to a pastor, because they take men away from the church. One of the worst things that men's ministries can do is to do this retreat that takes them away from church on a Sunday morning. I speak as a pastor there. They don't communicate what they're doing. So we urge and encourage and challenge and teach, how do you serve your pastor as a men's leadership team? But what we basically offer, you use the word consulting. We're not going to come in and do your discipleship. We're going to consult with your leadership team, and be that guy that we don't just bring in men's ministry, or Man in the Mirror resources. We've got a ton of resources. My statement a while ago of it used to be Gene Getz's book and Pat Morley's. Well, Pat has about 30 books, I think, and there are so many other resources that Man in the Mirror provides. But we're not salesmen. We are resource providers. So we may recommend men's fraternity. We may recommend Iron Sharpens Iron that's scrolling across the bottom of the screen right now. It's all those different things that are designed and here to help effectively disciple men. So our area directors know all of those things. They're the experts in ministry to men. So we first of all bring that expertise. Secondly, we bring in, I've used this phrase several times already today, we bring in a proven process, a model that is effective. Pat's doctorate, they did research on the model, the No Man Left Behind model, and the effectiveness of it. And that's where we get our churches that implement the No Man Left Behind model, that actually understand what the 3 platform steps are, what the conveyor belt, what the raw material of the undiscipled man, the final product of the discipled man, the driving engine of the create, capture, sustain. When they get that and they implement that, in a 2.5-year period, they see a 48% increase in the number of men attending their church. And this again is research driven, an 84% increase in the number of men in a discipleship process. What pastor would not want to see a 48% increase in the number of men attending his church and 84 in discipleship? So we bring that proven model, and then we work with the leadership team to, first of all, understand it, learn it and understand it, and then secondly, implement it. We don't want to just come in and, hey, we blasted you away with our great knowledge, now we're out the door. Our area directors actually work with a church. First of all, we help build that leadership team if it's not there. If it is there, we help, again, have that intentionality, that on-ramps, and that know your players. And then we'll work through that team to where they get a win. We want them to understand what a win looks like and how do you get that win. So we may come in and do one of our seminars. We have 5 or 6 seminars that we do, and those seminars have that built-in next step. So we can help a church put on that effective and exciting but effective event, and we'll help them actually do that next steps until they feel a confidence level. The leadership team feels a confidence level that they are now experiencing those results, that 48-84 result.
Wow, and it is. I mean, it is a tremendous thing. If you've not read, for our listening audience out there, if you've not read the No Man Left Behind book that was authored by Pat Morley, Brett Clemmer, and David Delk, I would highly recommend you getting that book, because it really shares a lot of valid information that Ron is just sharing with you, and also about how to put that leadership to game and what that leadership structure looks like, and just a lot of good resource and information. And I do appreciate that.
As a matter of fact, Mike, I don't know if you remember, the first time we met was it was outside of Myrtle Beach at a No Man Left Behind seminar that David Delk taught. I had just been hired as the area director for Chicago, and one of the requirements was to attend a No Man Left Behind.
Right.
I had never been to one. I had not read the book, and I walked into that seminar, completely ignorant, but I walked out slightly less ignorant, but with a wow. Yeah. This is what I'm going to get to do now. To help churches. David let me, and again, it was work with a couple of tables during that seminar, and to sit and listen to men getting it, and so to watch their level of enthusiasm go from, another seminar to, whoa, this is going to help us. I was pumped. I was ready to go back to my church that I had just resigned from to take this position and say, hey, you guys, take me back and let me get this thing going, which, fortunately they took me back as the consultant, and we did get it going in that church. But it's just a transformational, and that's what we talk about, our third purpose, transforming men. It's a transformational process that helps a leadership team actually know what we're doing when we meet, why we're doing it, and how to do it effectively.
Amen. Yeah, and I think that was like my 3rd or 4th one I've been to.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, it's. I'm gonna tell you something. It's every time I go to one, I pick up something new. I pick up something new from it. It's just unbelievable, and what you can get out of those No Man Left Behind seminars. And I know they've changed up just a little bit over the last couple of years.
I would be remiss if I didn't say that we now do them as a simulcast.
Yeah.
So any church anywhere can either be a simulcast host or can go to one in their area. And our next one is in August the 27th, I believe. The latest deadline to sign up is like the 3rd week of July to sign up as a host church. But you can contact, if you're listening to this, you can contact your area director or home office and be a host church, or find out what church in your area is hosting No Man Left Behind.
Well, don't you still do them live? Don't you still do?
Well, COVID kind of killed the live for the time being. I imagine we'll pick it back up as live, and area directors and myself as well can come in and do a vision flyover. We can help a church individually understand these concepts and get it. They can get the book, they can get the courseware. It's on the website. There's all sorts of ways that they can get a hold of, a leadership team can get a hold of No Men Left Behind. Shoot me an email and I'll be glad to talk with them.
If you don't mind, I do have your email up here that I'll throw up there for everybody to see. And
the one change, Mike,
okay.
It's two N's.
All right. So it's RONN is the way it is. And so we'll get that out there. But yeah,
that'd be very good.
Be sure that you reach out to Ron, and I'm sure Ron will be able to minister to you in any way he can in sharing you that information. Ron, I do appreciate that. We've got a few minutes here left. We're coming up on our time, so to speak, and I do want to give you an opportunity to do something. I want you to take what we have just talked about overall. We've talked about a lot of stuff, and you and I have such a passion for reaching our men and our local community and around our area. We could talk about this for 2 or 3 hours and not even broach most of what we probably, at least what you know anyway. And but I want you to take the next couple of minutes, if you would, and just kind of sum everything up. And what do you think of men? We didn't even get into talking about the culture of men in today's world. That's a whole new. Maybe I can have you on sometime in the future, and we can discuss that a little bit more, how we can break that. But I just want to give you a few minutes just to share your thoughts about ministry men, why it is so important for our churches, and as a pastor yourself, why pastors don't need to be so scared about letting men lead their men.
Well, one of the things, even just talking about the culture of men are hurting. When we talked about the hurting man, men are hurting. They, we're going to see one of the lowest attended men's Sundays ever in 2 weeks, and that's Father's Day. Why? We don't want to come to Father's Day and get beat up about what a bad job we have done or are doing. And so I would encourage pastors, don't preach a beat them up Father's Day message, but encourage men that there are answers, that we may have failed, we may have made mistakes, but there are answers. There's a way to correct that. So, if a pastor could remember, even his own relationship with his dad or relationship with other men, and realize that that's something that is just lacking today, that's what his men are hungering for. They may not know it. We can so fill our lives up with a junk food diet that we don't realize that we really need this protein. We really need this nutrition. So we may not be able to identify what it is we need until we actually taste it and see the Lord is good, and so is discipleship. So our relationship. Again, I think that was the secret sauce of Promise Keepers was they got it. They understood. Men really want to be men. They want to be challenged to be men. They want to have a place where they can be men. And so, that doesn't mean we're going to be, screaming out in the woods and doing all that stuff. It just means that we understand, hey, we have a role to play here. It is a leadership role. It's a biblical leadership role. It's a loving leadership role, but we've got a role to play here. So if we can get churches to understand their role in reaching out to men, so that men understand their role and understand what discipleship really looks like. What as you read my bio and you said that my passion is to help men develop a biblical worldview. Mm-hmm. Barna's research just recently came out and showed that less than 6% of Americans have a biblical worldview. That's the entire population. You probably could divide that in less than half to say 3%, 2% of men in our culture today have a biblical. Now, what does that mean? That means that when they're seeing a pandemic, are they interpreting it? I'm going to hold up two things. Are they interpreting it through the cell phone, the news, the mass media? Or are they interpreting it through the scripture? Thus saith the Lord. Less than 3% of men in America today are probably interpreting what's happening in their lives, their job, their family, their past, let alone their future, what's going on in COVID, what's going on with all the different things we hear about. Less than 3% are using the Bible as their filter, their worldview for how to change life. That breaks my heart. It ought to break the heart of pastors, of men's leaders, to think that we've got so many men who, when they're going through their marriage problems, because it's two people that are supposed to be coming together, but often are button heads, if they're interpreting their problems through the world culture, as Pat gave last week, the world, the flesh, and the devil, if that's their filter, and that's most men's filter, they're going to fail in that marriage. That marriage is going to end in divorce. And there's going to be, 1 million children every night going through that divorce situation, or 1 million. What is it? There's 17 million under the age of 18 who are being raised in their home without their natural father. Yeah. You talked about a book earlier. I've started a book and started and stopped it several times, but it's about children. I grew up in a single family, just my mom. My dad had died when I was 5 months old, so I grew up in a single parent home. My wife grew up in a single parent home because of a divorce situation. And we see, again, 17 million children grow up in that single parent home. What are we doing to bring in a "thus saith the Lord" in that situation? That's my heart's cry. That's my burden. How can we help churches build that ministry to the point that they are seeing there's something more than just pancakes once a month on a Saturday morning? There's something more that we can be doing, and we must be doing it. Discipleship changes everything, so we got to disciple our men.
Amen. And I just threw up the Man in the Mirror website for those of you who are watching this live, and reach out to maninthemirror.org, and you can gather more information on that. And of course, you can reach out to Ronn at Ronn Read at maninthemirror.organization too, if you're interested in more stuff. And I will throw one thing more in there, and that is the booksbythebox.org. There's a ton of it, because we don't have much time for me to share this, but I'm going to tell you something. That's a great opportunity for you to buy a pile of books that you can give out to every man that walked on your campus on Father's Day. Do not, our mentor, my mentor, and I think it was Ron's mentor too, used to tell us, do not forfeit Father's Day. Right. Use Father's Day as a launch pad. Don't beat them down like he was talking about earlier, but use it as a catalyst to reach your men, and you will be amazed at what happens. Ron, it was great to have you on today. We've ran out of time, and we've got to move. We've got to kind of close out our stuff. But I want to let everybody know that you all are a great resource, and I always enjoy talking with you. We don't get a chance to talk much these days, and maybe we can have you on again in the coming days and weeks, and we can talk about the situation of man and the culture today and how we can reach those. If you want to know more about Cape Fear Men, who hosts these podcasts, you can reach out to us by going to capefearmen.net, and we'll tell you a lot of the stuff that we do and what we're into, and especially the Iron Sharpens Iron conferences that are coming up in the fall. You can reach out to me personally at mike.sandlin at capefearmen.net, and I would gladly be able to speak and talk to you some more. And it's a pleasure and honor to be with you guys, and thanking Ron again for being with us. So I hope you will join us next time on Intentional Conversations with Mike Sandlin. And I will tell you this, Ron and I's good friend, Jeff Casale, who went home to be with the Lord a couple of years ago, used to say this blessing over us every time as he would pray for us. He would say, I pray that God will give you a rock to stand on, a brook to drink from, and a tree to shade you by. And we thank you for joining us on Intentional Conversations with Mike Sandlin. God bless, and we'll see you next time.